Welcome to Origin Stories. My guest this week is Mad Mike Whiddett. Mike is a professional drift car driver and arguably New Zealand's most successful personal sporting brand. I mean, obviously the All Blacks are an entity in themselves, but Mike has more Facebook followers than Dan Carter, than Richie McCaw, than Israel Adesanya even in the UFC. He's sponsored by Red Bull and Mazda, and he recently opened a new store and workshop he calls Mad Lab at Hampton Downs Motorsport Park. Mike, good to see you again. How you doing?
Good, dude, and yourself?
Yeah, great, thanks, great. How has 2021 been for you so far, Mike?
Oh, 2020. Well, it's been a very challenging year for most, including myself. Very different to what we usually do. With so much travel involved in our race program. We had over 30 international events on the calendar. That's not including all my son racing and my daughter riding her ponies, and then just actual family life. But of those 31 events, I did one. I got to Japan in January. We revealed the new car that we're going back to defend our championship that we had won, the Formula Drift Japan Championship, which is kind of like the pinnacle in the drifting, being in the motherland of Japan. And that was about as far as we got, man. And then it just turned into, I had to make the most of the year, and I just took it as opportunity. While many people were over social media saying, they're all now stuck at home and all gutted, and I just took it as a chance, one, to have the family time and bond with my kids. That, a lot of people look at my lifestyle and, the travel and all that looks like the dream, but that is a lot of time away from the family. So able to do that, and then also just taking the time that people always say, oh man, I just don't have the time to do certain things. And for me, and I know a lot of the other Red Bull athletes, and, just had that time now to be able to, think about the next world record or the next event or the next, I don't know, car for us, like car builds and stuff like that, just thinking outside the box. So it was, cool. Yeah.
Very good. I want to talk to you about building a personal brand. As I mentioned, you've got one of the biggest personal sporting brands in the country, and you're globally recognized and globally famous. But before we get on to that, I just want you maybe to explain in layman's terms what drifting is all about, because I'm guessing there'll be some listeners to this podcast who maybe won't have come across drifting before.
The drifting is like the circus of four-wheel motorsports. I take it like the most explosive, exciting, fun, crazy. I have the most fear. I've driven a lot of different disciplines of motorsport, but drifting is, by far my adrenaline, the fear and everything. But it's a judged sport. We're judged on line, speed, angle, and style. So being a judged sport, there is very subjective. But the idea is to literally slide a car out of control, but in control. So you're, full lock on the lock stops, drifting and executing. What the judges will give us in the morning will be a certain line on a racetrack. You'll go from doing car parks or roads in Japan to being on like Fuji Formula One circuit where the speeds are over 230 kilometers an hour, and trying to execute, the line and angle in the most explosive style. And I think what's so cool about drifting is that it doesn't require the biggest budget or the fastest cars to build or to be a champion. It's really down to personality, the way you build the cars, the way you drive the cars, the way the whole appearance of the team, because I definitely came into the sport with not much money at all.
Speaking of that, and the appearance of the team and the way you presented yourself and branded yourself, you were born in 1981, right? When was the Mad Mike brand born?
So Mad Mike, the name was born in 1999. I was freestyle motocross. I just done the transition really from racing motocross. I grew up with my mum, only child, and just solo mother. We lived in 1-bedroom units all around East Auckland. It was pretty common to be changing house every year, get a new bedroom, but we had the same bunk bed. I'd have the top, mum would have the bottom, and that was life till I was probably 12 or 13 years old. I raced motocross. My mum was super passionate with horses. So every weekend we were away, she would do the horse thing and I'd be playing with radio controlled cars and, trying to get these dirt bikes going that mum could afford that never really worked sometimes at the start. So I'd have to try and, just a self-taught kid self-taught mechanic, and just figure things out myself. So through those,
go on.
Yeah, so through those nights, got competitive in motocross, but then it just got too expensive for mum. We managed to get second in the New Zealand Nationals in like '97, and then I had to give it up. So freestyle motocross. The name Mad Mike came from 1999. Mike Peru was the commentator, New Zealand presenter, and I actually told him, dude, can you stop calling me Mad Mike? I freaking hated the name. And he's like, the first thing he said it's okay because I didn't give myself that name. So I was like, okay, and then the next weekend we were at, a dude's 30th birthday and people were calling me Mad Mike. And then we were at Big Boys Toys and people were calling me Mad Mike, and then Xair. I mean, it's turned into a brand.
You were stuck with it. Do you know where this passion, this love of motorsport came from? Like, was there anything in the family that would hint that you would go on to do this?
Oh man, it's crazy. No one raced motorsport. No one was like really hardcore into motorsport. My uncle Clay, he moved in and helped mum with rent, and so we went from a 1-bedroom unit to a 3-bedroom kind of house in East Auckland, and my uncle moved in and he worked at a car sales yard, and so he would bring home different cars every night, and I just loved to, he'd take me for a ride in the cars. And I remember going in some like Mazda Familiars with the turbo light that would come on, and he had a friend, Dean Cockerton, that was also he was racing the Formula Atlantics here in New Zealand, and that was one of Clay's best friends. So one of his sponsors was Indoor Grand Prix and Pam Ewer, and I remember they actually made a kart with short pedals and everything. So when I was sort of 8-9 years old, I could race around with Dean and Clay, and so I was always developing skills myself. With 4 wheels with those guys, and then 2 wheels, just a solo out on the farm.
Yeah, I think you called it paddock hacking. Tell me about that. What does paddock hacking involve?
Yeah, so I mean that's pretty Kiwi as to have paddock hack cars. We used to just be able to buy Toyota Corollas for $100 out of the trade and exchange, well before internet. Well before internet was around, but my mum didn't have internet. We had this paper that would come out on Thursdays, and we would race down to the dairy. Me and my buddy, he would, we'd be straight on the phone, and this is landlines, at the time, and it was like, oh, there's a Toyota Starlet out west, or there's a Mazda 323 out south for $100, and we'd have these just paddock hack cars, and we would take them and thrash them on the paddocks and gravel roads, and we used to cut the fences to get into Woodhull Forest, close the gates behind us, hurt no one except ourselves, and just rally hack all weekend. And we both moved on to make a career out of motorsport. So all those teenage days of paddock hacking and, spending, if we had $20, we would spend it on gas rather than, a box of alcohol or cigarettes or whatever other buddies were doing over the weekend.
Love it. And that's where you first learned to go sideways, to drive out of control while remaining in control, right? Yeah.
So, I mean, on gravel, grass paddocks, hitting motocross jumps, it was always a blast. And, it was just a skill that, I never, there was no sport of drifting around. There was no like, okay, when I was 13, I didn't even know drifting was going to be a sport. When I was 13, my biggest idol was Ricky Johnson. He was the Supercross champion in USA, and my auntie had Sky TV, and she would record the Supercross, and then I'd watch it back on the VHS, and had all my inspiration. Jeremy McGrath doing the knack-knacks over the finish of it, and kind of chased that dream. So that was my. I always had that California dream, but it was to get to California to be a Supercross world champion.
And you gave that up. Why? When did you give up on that dream?
The racing was obviously, as I said before, the money side of it. The freestyle motocross lasted about 3 or 4 years, but just so many broken bones. So many head injuries, knocked out sort of 8 times, 20 huge concussions. Bones sticking out my arms, my left leg still got titanium rods and pins all through it. 2002, I compressed and fractured 4 vertebrae in my back. Got told I was paralysed for life with the swelling that pinched the nerves. Fortunately, that's all it was. It was some crushed vertebrae, crushed disc in between my vertebrae, and and it was right at that point where I discovered this D1NZ event. So me and Tony went along to watch, the New Zealand pros, which was Fangadan, Gaz Wider, Justin Roode. We got to Pukekohe, we stood on the infield, and they came flying down fully sideways, 180 kilometers an hour, and Tony looked straight at me and was like, "You could do this." And I was like, "Fuck yeah," So we sold everything we had. She had show cars because, having such a supportive wife that's into motorsport and cars is amazing. So all these years, we'd always built custom cars for her for car shows, and we had my cars at the time. We were doing all the skid fests and rotary nationals, and it was just burnout comps because that's what we could afford. We couldn't afford the fast cars to do the drag racing, but burnouts, you could just go out there again with have your own personality and style. So drifting was just that next level from going from having that personality and style, being unique on a burnout pad, to actually expressing it on a racetrack with speeds, like I said, 180 kilometers an hour.
And you took the Mad Mike brand from motocross and Crusty Demons and that side of things and transferred it to your drifting career, I take it.
Well, it was never a brand like at that stage, and I was never trying to turn it into a brand. It was just the name. And but I remember, even the internet back then, it was when I did the transition, when we started building this drift car, and a bit of smack talk around, he's built it, because I was a rotary. I've been rotary since I was 13 years old, and built my first one because they were so cheap and easy and fast, loud, obnoxious, all the stuff that inspired me to build rotaries. But we were the first rotary to come into drifting. And so, there was a lot of smack talk around, it's a rotary, it's going to blow up, and it won't drift, it won't have enough power, it's just because he can flip motocross bikes doesn't mean he can drift. And all this talk that I could see over the internet, I was like, wow, man, that just really fueled my fire to succeed in this discipline, in this sport. And we managed to get our license the first time out in the car. I crashed into the wall on the first lap on the third corner without even doing a proper warm-up lap. But I guess that's where it all started. And then from this drifting was where the brand started from. I looked up to my inspiration, as I said before, Ricky Johnson and all that, and I see them at events and they had posters and stuff like that. So we were the first ones here with our own poster. We're the first ones in New Zealand that built a website, madmike.co.nz, and people were like, "What's this guy? He's got his own posters and website." It only took a month, and then there's another driver that's kind of following by suit. And I love to be a pioneer. But this is just, to be honest, it's just natural instinct for me to, obviously seeing what my fans are doing and just putting people that come to the event in what would have been my shoes if I ever got the chance to go to America and meet Ricky Johnson and Jeremy McGrath and Brian Deegan and all those guys. Yeah,
it helped as well, Mike, that you had a background in sign writing, right? And that side of things. So that, as you say, kind of came naturally, that, getting the look right, getting the design right, that was all something that came really naturally to you, I suppose.
Yeah, I've got a very good vision of what stuff's going to look like, and having that skill set in sign writing, being my trade out of school, and that came because my mum couldn't afford new motocross bikes. So when I was young, I'd go to all the sign writing shops, get all the offcuts of vinyl, their pinks and purples and teals, and I'd hand cut, make my own stickers and put them on my bikes and show up to racing, and people would think I'd have the latest, greatest bike, but it was actually 3 or 4 years old.
Right.
So the same, as soon as I went drifting, we showed up to the first round. My tow van matched my trailer, that matched the pit bike, that matched the car. We had this camo livery, and camo has just been something that's been like a signature of mine from, the early days. Again, going back to my teens, not being able to afford flash paint job, we would go to, Repco and buy $50 worth of rattle cans and just hand camo our old Mazda RX-3s and RX-2s. And even to this day, all our liveries carry some kind of camouflage in them, which has been my signature. So
I think another thing that you've
Yeah.
attributed to your success is just how hard you've worked. And you and your wife, Tony, I remember chatting to you a few years ago, and you talked about how, 2 o'clock in the morning, you and Tony were often, you'd be under the car with a spanner and a wrench, and Tony be on the computer sending out emails and doing that side of things. How important has that partnership been, Mike?
That is the most important part. The time is what builds it. It's the time and having that relationship, and for Tony to have the same passion as I do to, make a career out of it. And but it's also really hard to do it out of New Zealand just because of the time difference. So all these Skypes and conferences and stuff we're having, we're logging on at 2 a.m. with a meeting somewhere. It might be in UK for some event, or something that's going on, some sponsorship deal or whatever it is. The other thing that really motivated myself and Tony was, especially myself, was the year I went into drifting. The year I got picked up by Red Bull was 2008. I started drifting 2007. I got picked up by Red Bull 2008. It was the same year we had just had Lincoln. So my first and Tony's first child. And again, the talk that came about, like, oh, he's just had a kid. That's him. He's stuff. He won't be able to do motorsport. Just that, I don't know, that mental perception of if you've got a kid, that's just a handbrake, and now everything's about the kid. And man, we just took him along for the ride. We went to he would come along to these, big Red Bull deals, and would come along to the meetings, would swing him around in his little capsule and, hang him out, put him there with some Hot Wheels or whatever, and he would keep himself entertained. And he's just been there for the whole trip. And that motivated, for me, never meeting my father. And then having a son was just like the coolest thing ever. And I just wanted, the biggest dream of my life is to be the coolest father in life for my kids. So,
where was your father during all this, Mike?
I've never met my father. So, just hasn't been in my life. So I feel like I am who I am because of my mum giving me that freedom all those years of being able to do knack-knacks on the last lap of a motocross race and crashing and losing a few positions when I could have maybe won the New Zealand Championship, or giving me the freedom to come home and put oil stains all over the driveway and kill the grass with oil. And because we didn't even have a garage, we didn't have a carport even, we had a grass lawn that was very small, and it didn't have a full toolkit or anything. My mum is the biggest part of my success, and just giving me that freedom, and that's one thing I've done. And I've never been pushed into anything. Everything has been my own determination, my own motivation, to drive and be able to accomplish, whether it's building a radio control car or building a freaking Lamborghini.
That's right. You talked about sponsorship deals and meetings and bringing Lincoln along. Do you remember what was the first kind of big sponsorship deal you signed that made you realize, maybe I can make a career out of this? What was the turning point in terms of sponsorship?
Man, sponsorship. I mean, I remember probably the coolest deal, like definitely not the biggest, but the coolest deal was my first ever sponsor, which was Fox Motocross, like Fox riding gear.
Yeah.
And so they gave me one free gear set a year. This is like early 90s. So fluoro pink, fluoro purple, barbed wire, and Sports Pro were the distributors for it. And they would give me one free gear kit and then a discount to my mum for anything else, and I was probably 11 or 12 years old. And the coolest thing was they let me reveal the gear set, be the first one at one event before that would sell to the public. So I always thought that was just the coolest thing. I would rock up to motocross, I'd have my new graphics, pink and purple, I'd have these barbed wire pants that no one had ever seen unless they had seen it on Sky TV with Ricky Johnson wearing it. And I could just show it off. I've always been a bit of a show off, and I guess that's also part of succeeding with drifting. But so going from getting a free gear set in a year to signing deals with some of the world's biggest brands, Red Bull, Mazda, Lamborghini, just freaking incredible on where where it's gone.
And what were your negotiation skills like? Did you have somebody in those meetings watching your back, or did Tony and you, were you just winging it?
Mate, just honestly winging it. Like it was, I'm like, I was looking at, you know, other people getting sponsors and they got managers and agents and they're trying to sell this person, you know, going to a brand saying, I've got this guy, he's just won this championship, or he's blah, blah, blah. I don't know. But I'm like, man, if I was going to invest in someone, I'd want to meet the person that I'm investing in. And so for me, I would just show up. There's no suit and tie. There's no big booklet of paperwork. And this is what, you know, it was just pretty much me, you know, have some pictures but just my motivation and determination. And I don't know if it's the personality or,
so you never,
I don't know, man. I just, again, self-taught, man, just kind of just gone with it. And
So you never did PowerPoint presentations or anything like that?
No, I did. I got through being a designer, you know, but it's like, it's funny, you do like a proposal and like you make a big attractive proposal and you kind of drop it on the bench and, you know, CEO might look at it and kind of just like brush by, and I was like, oh man, really had no interest in just like sitting there. And, you know, as again, it comes back to that whole time thing as well of who has the time to go and sit through, you know, 10 pages. I'd find our proposals ended up being so different. It was just a simple, you know, back in those days, it was before Instagram and Facebook. So it was just a, you know, simple email. This is who I am. Would you be interested? If you are, okay, then let's meet. Rather than, you know, trying to just the first email being this big bloody proposal that's 20 pages long with all these stats and I don't know. And it worked. It worked.
And of course, you couldn't do what you do without sponsorship because, as you said before, you probably couldn't have picked a more expensive game or expensive playground to play in, right?
Yeah, I know, like being a, you know, growing up doing skateboarding and freaking being a BMX, anything I could get my hands on, and then my career ended up being drifting, which is, you know, sometimes you look at it, the running costs of obviously running motorsport, the risk of running motorsport. You know, I think, man, it'd be nice if I was a Red Bull skateboarder and I could just hop on a plane with my skateboard and fly to USA and do the X Games and then, you know, fly home with my skateboard on my backpack instead of we've got to take a 40-foot container or fly a plane that's fully loaded with, you know, the car and all the parts and, you know, fly a huge team all around the world. So, but it's, mate, it's so rewarding, honestly, to do it from New Zealand. You touched on the time, you know, and that we put into it, and that's true, man. We're still, you won't find us in bed before midnight, whether it's on a phone call, working on an email, thinking of something. You know, we did 10 years of Lincoln's life from when he was born to 10 living in a factory in East Tamaki with a little apartment on the top. Because I'd wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, have some car idea with some, you know, it might be, I don't know, body kit or something. And then I'd just be able to run downstairs and just start cutting up my car and changing things. And then wake up in the morning, be like, oh, babe, what do you think of this? You'd be like, oh, yeah, it looks really cool, but those fenders are probably going to be really hard to maintain because they're just going to fly off. And, you know, but having that, the lifestyle of the factory, you know, so people are like, oh, man, it's so cool. Your son gets to live in a factory with all these race cars and go-karts. And I'm like, yeah, but he doesn't have a fence to jump to play with any neighbors. He doesn't have, you know, a pool. He doesn't have a trampoline. He doesn't even have any grass around to kick a ball, you know. So those 10 years, I mean, there's been so much work and so much like sacrifice to a normal life to be able to build this life. And now, you know, we've been able to now build our dream home out here. You know, I've got an amazing partnership with Tony Quinn and Hampton Downs. And this is home. I got my house on one side of the racetrack. We overlook it. We've got pit bike tracks and we got the off-road tracks and we got, you know, for Link's upbringing now is very different than mine, obviously. But then, yeah, we've got the new shop, the Mad Lab, which we opened for the public to view. So, yeah, it's a lot of work and the whole.
It's been an incredible journey. I wanted to go back again to that idea, I suppose, of building this business and building this brand. I mean, you know, the idea, I think, as you said, of building a professional career out of drifting from New Zealand would have seemed like crazy before you started out in this journey. When was there a tipping point when you thought this is actually going to work? Was social media kind of a key part of that kind of that journey?
Yep, social media is definitely a huge part. As soon as Facebook was, came out, there then Instagram, and just being able to have that fan engagement, being able to do a post and having 100% control of it. That's the same. We were talking before about, having managers and agents and people that run the meetings for you or run your social media for you. I believe like our growth in the social media platform is because we 100% do it ourselves. It's me talking on there, it's me posting the pictures. For sure, Tony's on there. She'll make sure the posts go up that are contractual giveaways and prizes and stuff. She'll make sure all those are in line. But mate, if people are talking to me, and that's where that fan engagement grows. There'll be someone, I'll post something up and then someone will ask a question, what motor was in this? And then, you'll have some other guy come in and be like, Mad Mike ain't going to answer your question, mate. And you'll answer the question, and then you've got another 10 comments like, oh, wow, it's actually Mad Mike here talking. And then it just grows, man, and having that engagement. And I love it. It's just, for me, it's just natural. If I had ever met Ricky Johnson, like, I would have just dreamed. I have met Ricky Johnson, and I did get the time to talk to him. But there's also other people that I've looked up to that now think, wow, okay, they're not as cool as what I actually, when I watch them riding or whatever, sometimes is that the saying, never meet your heroes. But I just love to engage with my fans and hopefully inspire other youngsters, or young and old, any generation, to be able to chase dreams and do what you love.
Were there any other kind of people in the motorsport space that you looked up to in terms of building a business? Like, I mean, there's been guys like, I suppose, Travis Pastrana and Ken Block, guys like that, who have translated their incredible skill in the motorsport into these massive brands. Was that an inspiration, or were they people you looked up to?
Yeah, so there's Brian Deegan. So Brian Deegan obviously coming in into the freestyle motocross movement. Much similar. Well, I could kind of base my upbringing very similar to his, and being a bit more grassroots on a much lower budget. But and then him building Metal Militia, and that was a brand that I looked up to. And then Brian Deegan actually supported us through a few years of us competing in Formula Drift in USA. I got to meet Brian Deegan. He was like the coolest dude, and just to have him wanting to support our program, or go out to his place in Temecula, and it was incredible. So those sort of guys, what they have built from their name and their passion and their sport, was definitely inspiring. Ken Block, again, another good friend of mine, founder of DC, and built a massive career out of, one, made the brand very successful, and then now the sport kind of does the whole lot. So
yeah, fantastic. Is there a misconception, do you think, that, I mean, amongst the general public, of just how business minded and switched on you have to be to make a career out of what you do? I mean, people see drifting and they see the smoke and they see the speed, and they maybe think, maybe associated with boy racing or something like that, but it's so much more than that, isn't it? Because you guys just have to be so switched on and so business savvy to make this work, right?
Yeah, well, as a driver, for sure, there's the perception, as you say, is a bunch of boy races. I mean, it only takes one news presenter. That's the thing with New Zealand, and is it's still perceived as a bit of a boy racer sport, guys drifting sideways, and because we've got smoke coming off the tires. But like, it's only takes one news presenter for some kid that's doing some donuts around a roundabout, wipe out some pedestrian and put them in hospital or kill them, to then be and a news presenter say, kid drifting around roundabouts. Like, that's not drifting. We drift over 200 kilometers an hour on, putting ourselves this close to, millimeters on NASCAR bank walls, or, our film shoots with Red Bull. We do it on cliff drops, and, the precision and the skill set of the drivers is incredible. But then the brands, obviously, that represent, I think the best thing for drifting in New Zealand was, not just for me, but for drifting in general, was when Red Bull got involved. And then, because everyone knows Red Bull sponsor the elites, they sponsor, the events. And when Red Bull is behind something, they know it's the pinnacle, or this person is the pinnacle. So fortunate for me, it was me to be able to wear that dream helmet that I always wanted. but at the same token, I was thinking, man, this is so cool, the credibility for our sport now. So this started in New Zealand, and then, we get an invite to go to Australia, V8 Supercars, and do a demonstration there. And then all of a sudden it's like Red Bull, Mad Mike does this, we're drifting faster than half the race cars around these corners with my arm out the window waving at the kids on the fence. And then, we're at Goodwood Festival of Speed, and we're the first one to drift, Yas Marina in Abu Dhabi, and we're in Thailand and Singapore, and just all of a sudden representing, it's not just representing Mad Mike and my team and my partners, but the credibility for drifting is just growing. And then to, Goodwood Festival of Speed. Yeah. So that helps with being able to build this into a business and getting these credible brands that obviously have the financial support to make it a career and a business, and to make it viable. And part of what you're doing out at Hampton Downs and the Mad Lab kind of shop and workshop and the drift events you're running is to, again, raise the profile of drifting and raise the credibility, correct? Yeah, raise the profile, and also just help others be able to chase my footsteps. If someone else wants to make the career in drifting, then whether you want to just come out here to our Mad Mike Drift Force days and just enjoy it as a social environment with your mates, or whether you do want to pursue it and try to take it as a career. And I've proven you can make a living out of it, a healthy living out of it, and doing it right here from New Zealand. Yeah. I want to get back again to the social media side of things. So I think over 2 million followers, or around about 2 million followers on Facebook. Was there any milestones along the way where you had to pinch yourself? Like, was cracking the million mark on Facebook one of those moments where you went, holy moly, we're doing this? I remember cracking 10,000, and I thought that was freaking wild. I'm like, there's actually 10,000 people that want to follow me, what I'm doing. And then it's just growing, I guess, because as life goes on, I've got kids, so I'm not just inspiring people I'm not just engaging people as a athlete driving a car sideways, inspiring other fathers that you can still do all this kind of stuff being a father. You just take your kids with you, and all the other stuff that we do, whether it's off-road racing or BMX and doing flips or motocross, I live life full throttle, man. There's not a minute of the day I'm not thinking or racing, or I've got 2 very competitive kids that everything's a competition, so that keeps us pretty active and fit and busy. But there's not a minute that goes by that I'm not full throttle. What's the biggest crisis you've faced in your life so far, Mike, would you say? Yeah, man, I don't know. Most people would say 2020 would be, Sure. But like I said, I just took it as opportunity. Yeah, of course, the financial support. A lot of my financial income comes from appearance fees, from doing these events all around the world. And I'll be straight up, I make a healthy salary, but a big part of our income every year is the appearance fees from all these events. And to have 31 international events now not been on the calendar, it is a huge whack out of the income. But for me, I just took it as motivation and time and an opportunity to just bond with my kids. And I managed to be able to, buy a car with my son when he was 11, and it was his 12th birthday. Got a little MX-5, and then lockdown happened, and we built a drift car together. So I showed him all the ins and outs, and so from doing that to showing people how to make paper planes on social media, whether you've got a huge budget or whether you got no budget, trying to just inspire people to think outside the box. So I'd say 2020 was definitely the most challenging of the lot. We've had crashes and stuff, all that stuff happens in motorsport. Put himself in hospital, and there's a lot of things there's a lot of setbacks, but just keep charging, man. It'll make it worth it. Cool. What are your ambitions? Where do you have you got a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan about where you want to take the business? Will you still be competing? Always working 5-year blocks. For 5 years, but all our partnerships always look, what's the next 5 years? But in 5 years, this is where we want to be. And just, I guess for me, if I can inspire others, to my story that, you know, a lot of people look at my program, just people that don't know my story think that, you know, dad's bought him all the stuff, wealthy family, you know, he's got all the cars and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, that's, as you guys have just heard, it's quite different. If you've got the motivation and determination, it's far more powerful than money in motorsport.
That's a great way to finish, Mike. Listen, thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it, and great to chat with you.
Epic. Rad. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, fella. Listen, go well. All the best.
Thank you, bro.